President Starr, members of the Board of Trustees, members of the faculty, proud parents, staff, and above all, graduates. I'm filled with joy to mark this milestone in the life of the class of 2018 with you. This is a bookend for me. In 2009, I was honored to have my first book chosen by Pomona as a first-year read. So having come to Pomona for orientation, I'm privileged to be here with you at the other end of a college career. While today is a day of celebration, I'm not addressing those of you who are filled with self-congratulation. I'm addressing those of you, or perhaps that part of each of you, who are filled with trepidation about how your lives will unfurl. Sooner or late, you will all confront days when your path forward seems unclear or invisible. This speech is for those days. When I graduated from college in 1991, I experienced how quickly the weather of life could shift. I'd won a fellowship to Oxford, which gave me 2 years to pursue any field I wanted. But my elation did not last long. As soon as I arrived among those dreaming spires, I realized that for what felt like the first occasion in my life, I had unhurried time without a predetermined purpose attached to it. I was forced to face myself, and more particularly, to face the fact that I was gay. At Pomona in 2018, it is hopefully hard to recreate how much of a struggle this was for me. At that time, coming out as gay felt like career suicide. More importantly for me, it seemed to foreclose any possibility of the marriage and children I yearned to have. The only consistent foray I made from my college rooms in my first year was to the chapel where I prayed for conversion to heterosexuality. Yet that dark time was also formative. I was deciding whether the next step for me would be graduate school in literature or law school. I chose the law because I deemed it the language of power. I felt much need of power then, as I was in a position of extreme vulnerability. In hindsight, that choice was an act of hope. It assumed that I could argue my way out of the stymie of my young adulthood. One thing I immediately loved about the law, and love to this day, is how legal opinions force clarity on shapeless social norms. The anti-gay animus that was often just in the air had to be spelled out in those opinions. That articulation made those views available for contestation. Take the case of Bowers versus Hardwick, which I read in my first year constitutional law class. In that 1986 case, the United States Supreme Court confronted the question of whether same-sex sexual intimacy was worthy of protection under the right to privacy. Michael Hardwick had been prosecuted for consensual same-sex sexual intimacy in his own home under a Georgia statute that could have put him in prison for up to 20 years. The court found that the right to privacy did not extend to what it called same-sex sodomy. As a majority opinion, per Justice Byron White stated, same-sex sodomy had nothing to do with the domains of marriage, procreation, or family that had characterized the earlier right to privacy cases. With gratuitous scorn, the majority went on to say that any claim to the contrary was, at best, facetious. Chief Justice Warren Burger felt impelled to write a separate opinion couched in even stronger terms, observing that homosexual sodomy had been described by a celebrated English jurist as an offense of deeper malignity than rape. As a first-year law student, I had to debate with classmates whether my own adult consensual romantic relationships constituted a crime worse than rape. Those discussions put me to my choice. Would I side with my own deepening intuition that it was society, not I, that needed conversion? Or would I side with those millennia of moral teaching by internalizing their shame? It is a testament to my own parents, teachers, and friends that I had the audacious self-regard to side with myself over those millennia. As painful as it can be, possessing a conviction fundamentally at odds with their social world can be a gift. I never had to ask myself why I was dedicating my life to this work. I saw people routinely being fired from their jobs, denied custody of their children, or even thrown in jail simply for loving someone of the same sex. I left law school knowing I would try to craft the intellectual foundations to right this wrong, and was hired onto the tenure track at Yale Law School 18 months after I graduated. I spent the next years passionately writing about gay rights, teaching gay rights courses, and working on gay rights cases. The year I got tenure, 2003, was the year the Bowers case was overruled. While others did vastly more than I was proud to see the amicus brief I'd co-authored cited in that case. At this point, I began to feel the extreme serendipity of the timing of my life. Had I been born a century earlier, I would not have been able to do anything in this space. Had I been born a century later, I would hopefully just be doing mop-up work. But I was born in 1969, the year of the Stonewall riots, sparked the modern gay rights movement in the United States. So I was given the chance to argue for my life and then to live the life for which I had argued. I felt the serendipity most profoundly in my family life. When my husband and I sought to marry, the state of Connecticut had become one of the handful of states that permitted same-sex marriage. When we welcomed our daughter and then our son into the world, we could give them the legal protections afforded a traditional family. And the year I published a book on same-sex marriage, that right became the law of the land in the path-marking 2015 case of Obergefell versus Hodges. Of course, the struggle continues. About 70 countries in the world still criminalize same-sex sexual intimacy. A half dozen still punish it with death. Here in the United States, my community still struggles against conversion therapy, vastly disproportionate rates of youth homelessness, and the assertion of religious rights to discriminate against us. Like any of us, I still have days where the path forward seems unclear or invisible. What sustains me is the knowledge that my life is one where the unimaginable became real. Now it is a life without this husband, these children, this community that seems unimaginable. So what does this mean for you? I want to say something kind and something stern. The kind bit is to be gentle with yourselves. Young adulthood is seen by many to be the glory of life. Yet for me, it was the most difficult of its passages to date. Life will not turn out the way you have planned it now. but please comfort yourself with the knowledge that it would be a tragedy if it did. The only way you could be guaranteed a life that ran to current plan would be if the story of your life were already written. But you are not the reader of your life, you are its author. Give yourself the time, tranquility, and suspension of disbelief every author of a masterpiece deserves. Now comes the stern bit. It is fashionable, to the point of cliche, to tell young people to be themselves, to be authentic, to bring their whole selves to their work. But oftentimes, our truest selves will not be celebrated by the world, and indeed, may be denigrated by it. In those instances, it is not enough to be yourself. You must argue for yourself. This will be true along familiar lines like race, national origin, gender, gender identity, disability, age, or citizenship status. Current events teach us all that all of us must engage more deeply, listen more carefully, and then argue more strongly for what we believe. But there are many other identities to which the world is hostile. Sometimes you will have to advocate for subtler selves, the self in you that is an artist, an athlete, or an atheist. In ways large and small, you will have to pit yourself against the moment, or even the millennia. Fortunately, you're well equipped for this indispensable project. What a liberal arts education teaches you is to argue in the best sense of that word, not in the more modern sense of being quarrelsome, but in the classical sense of contending for what you believe is true and right and good. For the last 4 years, you have argued for a test, for a paper, or a thesis defense. Now you must go forth and argue for something greater: yourself, your families, your communities. I look forward to watching you become ever more yourselves and to have you take us to unimagined places, one argument at a time. Thank you.